All right, welcome back. My name is Penny Sansevieri, and my company is Author Marketing Experts. Now, there are a number of handouts that you should have from me. The slides for today, as I mentioned at the beginning of the intro, we don't have a PowerPoint presentation today, so we're doing little manual slides. We're not going to cover all of them, but I'm going to give you a good overview of most of the content on the PowerPoint that you were handed. I also have this, which is a little internet tip sheet and some notes, placed for notes on the front. If you didn't get that, I have more of those. I have plenty of those up here. Okay. Did you not get those? All right. I'm just going to pass out. If you didn't get it, go ahead and grab. There's two of these on there. There you go. I also have an email newsletter, and everybody here today is going to get my free Twitter ebook if you want to sign up for the newsletter. I will put one over this side. You're welcome. All right. As I mentioned to you at the beginning of this session, my company specializes in marketing and promotion. And we've done so for over 10 years. About 7 or so years ago, I realized that we have a little bit of a problem. The good news is we live in a country where anybody can publish a book. The bad news is we live in a country where anyone can publish a book. At that time, there were approximately 500 books published every single day in the US. Now that number has escalated to 1,500 every day. New books, mind you. So I was sitting on a flight from San Diego to JFK, and I had forgotten to bring anything to read. So I sat there with my, I know, she's rolling her eyes. I'm like, that was my own personal hell. So I sat there with my notepad. The guy next to me kept wanting to talk. Hey, what do you do for a living? Go away. I'm so personable. I sat there with a little notepad, and I said, there's got to be a better way to do this marketing thing. And we were working with a lot of small press, self-published authors, and we still do. But at that time, we seemed to get a real flood of these folks come through our door. And if you've how many of you have actually published a book? How many of you have published a book? All right. Okay. How many of you just sort of thought, this is really hard work, right? Writing the book was the easy part, right? Right? And, our authors that were coming to us were sort of saying the same thing. They said, gosh, you know what? I can't get into bookstores. I can't get reviews for this book. I don't know what to do. So I started to noodle on that long 5.5-hour flight. And I thought, you know what? We need to spend more time online. And I happened to be invited to a publishing party while I was back there. And publishing parties in New York are kind of funny. People the first thing people will do when they walk up to you is they want to know who you're working with. They don't want to know what you did. They want to know who you're working with, right? It's kind of interesting. So I walk up to this group, and people ask me, who do you work with? And there was really no name recognition. And I said, we started talking about marketing books. And they were, publishers, by the way, will always lament the fact that they can't sell books. For years, they've said, oh, we're not selling books. I mean, people all think that it's the recession. It's really not. It was just an excuse. New York publishers will always tell you, oh, nobody's buying books, which is amazing considering that every year they double how many books they publish, right? But anyway. So I'm standing there talking to this group of people, and I was talking to this editor at a publishing house who shall remain nameless. And I said to him, you know what? I said, I'm going to start investing my company's equity in internet marketing. And he sort of snickered. And he looked at me and he said, marketing online? Really? Well, there's really no future in that. I'm pretty sure that he's flipping burgers now. So that took me on this journey that I was not expecting to go on, frankly. That was pre-red hot internet publicity. It was pre-Twitter. It was pre-Facebook. It was pretty much pre-everything. And as I started to dig in more and more on the internet, I found that not only was the ROI the ever important return on investment better. But the lasting exposure of online marketing was absolutely mind-blowing. You should never hire a marketing and publicity firm to sell books for you. I know it sounds really weird. Nobody can promise you book sales. Nobody can tell you, oh my gosh, you know, if you go into this campaign, you're going to sell so many books. If somebody tells you that, you should run. You hire a marketing and publicity firm to get you exposure. That exposure can leverage you into book sales. And that's why the internet is so good, is because of exposure. You know, before the session, and I apologize, I know I'm moving out of the camera view. I saw this book on the bookshelf. David Steele, bless his heart, he's one of our authors. We worked with him probably about, I think, 3 years ago. We still get calls for the media for him. Last week, Cosmopolitan called and wanted to do a story on his dating tips. Do any of you know who David Steele is? No. You know why they call him? Because he's online. We marketed him online like crazy. And I said, David, I said, listen, I said, you've got to create just this surge in this community that Grell was talking about. You've got to build your platform. And that's exactly what he did. And bless his heart, the man still continues to market the same book. And he does very, very, very well. You know, David, I worked with David about 8 months before his book came out. And he said to me, he said, you know, Penny, he said, my worst nightmare is that Dr. Phil is going to release a book on the same day that mine's being released. Sure enough. He found out that Dr. Phil's, but not that Dr. Phil knows anything about dating, but he's a brand, right? At the same time, we still get calls for David Steele. Now, when we marketed him, by the way, this is also an interesting caveat, we never pitched him to traditional media. We did all online for him. But the traditional media found him because of his online exposure. Now, that's one thing that I think is important to note. Traditional media is dead. Okay? Web 2.0, how many of you really know what the term Web 2.0 means? Web 2.0 it was actually coined at an O'Reilly conference. Web 2.0 means a collaborative internet, and that is an internet that is driven by the consumer, by you, which is one of the reasons that Twitter is so phenomenal, which is one of the reasons that Facebook, YouTube, and all these places have taken off. What's happening now is the media follows consumer buzz. Now, I'm not telling you to not market yourself to the media, because we also do traditional media, and you know, we've had people on all the major shows, and that's all great. Does it always leverage in book sales? Not always. What I have found is that if you can combine, if you can blend your offline efforts with your online efforts, and I generally recommend a balance of about 60-40, so 60% internet, 40% offline. You're getting into a metric where you're looking at a success ratio that's actually going to start to pay off. Because at the end of the day, you know, when I started, you know, everybody, all the time that I've been in business, the first question I get asked when I sit down, 9 times out of 10, how many books do you think I'll sell? I don't know. Really, I wish I had a magic wand. It's funny, nobody can predict a bestseller. There was a guy last year that we actually lost a number of clients to, who promoted, and Grell, I don't know if you heard about the story, it's a really great story. I think he was in Texas. Guaranteed that your book would hit the bestseller list. Guaranteed. Right? And people come to me, well, Penny, can you guarantee that? No. And I'm not even going to try, because, you know, I really don't favor prison. So, right? So, turns out the guy was buying the books and warehousing them. No, I'm really serious. I heard this through Scotland, New York, yeah. Buying the books and warehousing them. We lost probably, I don't know, half a dozen or so. Oh, I gotta be a bestseller. Now, they were on the bestseller list, but you know what happens with those books when they came out of the warehouse? Because eventually, he's got to get rid of the books that he's, right? They end up back in the system. They end up back in returns. They end up being the books that you see, you know, the books that for $1 that are selling on Amazon. And you're like, why is that person selling my book for $1, right? It's this guy in Texas buying up all your books. So the key is really consistency, and that's where the internet comes in. Now, Web 2.0, the collaborative, collective internet, means that you've got to identify your consumer. You've got to identify your market, which is the first point that Grail talked about. Let me tell you something. You are not permitted to publish a book that doesn't belong in an existing genre. Period, bottom line, end of story. I have people who come to me and say, you know what, I'm going to create my own genre for this book. No, you're not. Unless you are the tsunami that is Dan Brown, who could probably create any genre he wants, or Stephen King, or any of the big names, you are not allowed to create your own genre. If the audience for your book does not exist, there's probably a reason why. Right. Nobody's ever written a book like this? Do your research. Maybe there's a you know, we had a guy a number of years ago who wrote a dating book for men. This is great, except 96% of self-help is bought by women, with all due respect, guys. Right? So you're writing a book for a 4% audience. Wow. Let me tell you what, you think your marketing is hard? This poor guy with his 4% audience, right? So what we did, I actually did a marketing consultation with him, and I said, I got bad news for you. You have no audience for this book. So instead he wrote it for women and sort of, you know, kind of turned the tables on it. And he ended up doing really well. He self-published the book, and then a publisher came in later and bought him.